before I begin, something occurred to me yesterday when we were at Hershey Park. And I have to wonder if my son didn't plan this. You see, we haven't been the kind who make big deals about anniversaries, and we celebrated a lot of them at Little League parks. And there was one year in particular that Sherry and I looked at each other, and I think it was Sherry who brought it up first. She says, "You know what today is?" And, "What?" "Our anniversary." "Oh yeah, that's right. You want me to go to the snack shack and get you a hot dog?" Half the crowd burst out laughing. Another couple did it the next week. And it's funny, because yesterday we had lunch at the park at Nathan's Hot Dog, so it seemed appropriate. I wonder if somebody planned that. So. Anyway, I was thinking about how to begin this particular sermon, this important topic. Introductions are important things. They bring people in, or they bore them to tears. I was hoping not to be boring. But I had this tune that was stuck in my head, and it just wouldn't let go. It's like a fly that you can't get rid of, just buzzing around. And it's a tune from a long time ago. It's from a previous century. It's from a previous millennium. But I couldn't get rid of it, because it wraps up today's message. You know, this is a catchy little tune, a short refrain. And it was from 1967, the Beatles, "All You Need Is Love." But it made sense. So now we're going to go back another millennia. We're really going to stretch back now. And we're going to go back towards the beginning there when Jesus was out, and he's imparting a particular message to his disciples. It's an important message. He does it in a prayer. And he says that they may all be one as a people, that they might come together in unity. And why? Why was he doing that? So that the love with which you have loved me may be in them. He's praying to God that the love of the Father for the Son might also be in the disciples. It's a beautiful hymn. It's a beautiful prayer. And Jesus sends that hopeful message down every generation since. Are we listening to that? Hope so. These were troubling times for Jesus when he's praying this prayer. His religious leaders were plotting his death. They were on the verge of succeeding in that plot. As a matter of fact, they were offended that he hung out with all the wrong people. He preached the Spirit instead of the letter of the law. He called out the leadership for traditions that made it hard on the people, but made it easier on the leader. Kind of suspicious, those laws and traditions. And they were unbothered that he was getting a larger and larger following amongst the people. This was disturbing to them, and they were afraid it would also be disturbing to the Roman Empire, which you really didn't want to upset. So, he's had one of his own disciples, Judas, has left the final dinner where this prayer is being made to go out and betray Jesus to those leaders so that they can complete their plot. He's been trying to prepare his disciples for his own end, for his death and his resurrection, and they just haven't been hearing him. And so he's praying a serious final message for them that he really hopes will stick with them, that they might be united in love. How many times have messengers throughout our history who have called out for love for everyone been met with violence and with death? You'll find it in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. Prophets came to ugly ends many times. And you see it in history ever since. Societies seem to be splintering all around us today. Hate groups are on the rise. We seem to be dividing into ever smaller groups of allies. We're watching the trust in all of our institutions erode steadily, including the church, sadly, not without reason. We see reports of violence every day, from all sides, in all places. We are left jumping at our own shadows. Parents pray that when their children go out, that they're not going to get into trouble. When I was a kid, if you've ever seen the Calvin and Hobbes comic strip, I was Calvin, Mom was Hobbes, and you often saw her literally throwing him out the door and telling him not to come back till dinner. Well, she didn't actually throw me out the door, but you get the idea. Today, parents are afraid that their children, when they go out, will be misidentified. They pray they won't be arrested or kidnapped or killed. And the troubles here and now loom so large in our lives, we're becoming preoccupied with them. It's making it very difficult for us to have constructive ideas on what we should do with our own futures because of fear. We talked about the serpent introducing fear in the garden way back when. And it's never left us. It haunts us still. Individualism has become so strong that we've forgot that part of the job of this institution of ours that's thousands of years old, that was gifted to us by Jesus Christ, that's bigger than any given generation, was to support us, to provide us help when we needed it, that we might be one, so that we could weather the storms. What was it Jesus said we needed? How do we get to this unity, to this be oneness that he is praying for 2 millennia ago? Well, Jesus prays for his disciples. And it's a prayer that includes Jesus' commandment to them that he's made earlier. Back in chapter 13, he told his disciples, "Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And that's where this prayer is going today. Jesus gives his disciples a great secret. He says God and Jesus are one in their love for each other. And this is a love the parent has for the child. And Jesus said, God gave you all, you disciples, to me, to care for, to extend that love that comes from God and into me, down through into you, that you might be gifted with that same love. Despite all your disagreements, and they are going to have some doozies, particularly over whether and how to let Gentiles, which means people to believe anything else than what they believe, into Christianity. Oh my goodness, this would be a huge debate. And then you go down through the centuries since, there have been all sorts of really interesting and sometimes downright weird debates. He says, this will help you to be one, to stick together in unity, despite all of that. And you're going to learn that the love grows through being self-sacrificing, through serving others. Jesus reminds them, I came to serve, not to be served. And the disciples are to do the same. All the disciples are to do that. When Jesus goes, the disciples are to share their love with others. Everyone knows that you are disciples by the love you have for each other, by your unity. It'll make you different from everybody else. And other people are going to desperately want that. They need it. Everyone needs it. When faith grows through loving service to others, lovingly sharing the good news with them, lovingly being witnesses to the world, gifting them with the good news. Love works towards greater ends, bringing the world to faith in Jesus, bringing bringing it back to the love that God gives freely to anyone who will reach for it, to anyone who knows it's there. We got to help people know it's there. It's a beautiful vision. And it's been a prayer that's come down through the centuries and through the millennia from Jesus to each and every one of us. As the early Christian church grew, that purpose based on Jesus' prayer would reach out to all sorts of outsiders, people that they had not met back in Jesus' day, bringing them into that love, extending that love to them. That love becomes the central force of the Christian faith. It's focused on Christ and all that Christ taught. It's very different from any model of human society that has ever been, because of its love. It stands apart for that. Becomes attractive because the people who are in it, who are loved and loving, they see that they're free. They're free from idolatry, from fear, and from cutthroat tactics. They have discovered a joy that is profound and comes from loving others, from living in unity. And it's meaningful for all Christians. It was meaningful for everyone because it was unifying. It was equaling. It was for the Jews and the Gentiles alike, for men and women, for slaves and free, for people from various lands, from the east and the west, the north and the south. All could be unified in love. The love that God extended to them through Jesus Christ. And the prayer echoes down across time, throughout the world, calling for that Father-Son loving bond to be a unifying force for all of us, for all Christians, drawing all Christians back to the love of God, the love that God has for them, and to the joy that comes from that and from service to others. It's not easy, especially with all the different pulls and distractions of life, all the divisions that are caused by, you name it, politics, culture, faith, it's all there. But it's worth it. It's worth fulfilling Jesus' prayer. We're answering a bold yes to the prayer that he had for all of us. It's a beautiful vision for how life can be lived better. So we remember that unity, and we commemorate it today. Ta-da! We break the bread and we share the cup together to remind us what Jesus did for us and how Jesus wanted us to be one. Every time we break bread together, have the dinner that Jesus and his disciples had. It reminds us to remain unified, to serve each other in love. When I was a child, I may have told you this before, that's a trick about doing this for a while, you may repeat yourself. And I'm going to. When I was a child, I was incredibly frustrated because I listened to the sermons and I heard all the stories in Sunday school and I felt like I had missed out because I didn't live in the Bible times. I had not gotten to follow Jesus directly. I didn't know the answer to the question if Jesus had said, "Follow me," would I have done it? You know, way back when. I didn't get to learn from sitting at his feet or from being part of the crowd. I didn't get to eat the fish. I thought I had missed out on the parade. I had missed out on what was going on, but it wasn't true. But I learned this later. Because look, that prayer that Jesus made wasn't just for his disciples, his immediate disciples. That was for each and every one of us. Every disciple that would ever learn about Jesus from the Word the disciples said, the words that they wrote down. Everyone, that prayer is for, that you might be one, that you might love one another. Jesus prayed that prayer for every Christian who would ever be, every person who would ever be. Jesus is praying for you and for me right down across the millennium. No one is left out. Jesus prays that we will remain faithful, that we will trust and follow the Holy Spirit's guidance, that we will remain part of a vital church community there to support us. That we will serve in an organization larger than ourselves that has been around longer than any of us, that our parents served in, families served in, down the generations. We might be part of it. And that for our own part of the journey, that we will gift new generations with that as well. That we will hand it down to children, grandchildren, people's children we've not yet met. And it all depends on having that close relation with Jesus. Now here's one of the secrets of the whole thing. Here's one of the tricks. The closer you walk to Jesus, the more you learn about the way Jesus did things and the way Jesus wanted it done. The closer walk with thee that you have according to the hymn, the better you're going to have that unity, that love. Because it changes you. The more you know about Jesus and the more you try to be like Jesus, the more it bends the way you think. The more it changes what you do. Before long you find yourself thinking and doing things that you might not have done in the past at all. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee you that if you follow this closely, you will bend so far at some point you may not recognize the old you. You'll become a stranger not only to a lot of community around you, you'll become a stranger to yourself. The self you used to be. And you won't want to go back. There will be joy in it. You'll love it. And there's freedom in that. Joy. Inclusion. We want to be safe. We want to have a freeing place for people of all different backgrounds and cultures and traditions, men and women, and all the rest. A place where they can find love and joy and freedom and inclusion right here together. Some early Christians prayed a prayer. They prayed a particular way to Jesus all the time so that it would change them. It would get them to walk closer to Jesus, to be more like Christ. In fact, Christian, that term was a derisive term that was first came out. It was applied to us by people that didn't know us as, oh, they're Christians. It meant little Christs. It was supposed to be satire. But that's what we become. We become like little Christs. We don't become perfectly Jesus. We can't do that. But we become more like Jesus. We become Christians. And when we do this, we love God better. And we discover that we love one another better as well. And we serve one another better over time. We become more mindful of serving others here in the church and the community around the world. A college chaplain was talking about a faculty member who was having a lot of difficulties with a particular trial. And said, I need some spiritual guidance. And so he came to the chaplain and said, what can you do for me? Can you help me out? Can you send me to some place where I can get some guidance? He says, at first I started ticking off churches in my head where I could send this individual. He says, but then it hit me. He says, he worked in prison ministry as a volunteer. He taught prisoners about Jesus and the Bible and love and unity. And one of the prisoners had said something to him that stuck in his mind. And he remembered it at this moment, and the prisoner had said, people think prison makes us hard, but it doesn't. It makes us brittle. We need people we can be vulnerable with and real with if we're to survive it. And so, he suggested to this family, this faculty member, that basically these prisoners needed what you can offer, which is love. And you'll find a way out of your problem through that. He says, and let me guarantee one thing too. If you go into that prison, if you meet those people, you will find Jesus. Because Jesus is there calling you. He's always with the outcasts, calling you. And it worked. God loves Jesus and us. God gave us Jesus in love. And Jesus took care of us out of love and prayed that we would be one in love, and we would share that love with others. May it be so with us today and always. Let's pause for a moment of silent reflection. Jesus